Welcome to the Canon Cantina, a Star Wars show where we try to answer the question, who is Luke Skywalker, before the release of Star Wars Episode 9. How's everybody doing? My name is Jesse, and I'm here with my co-host Mike, my Star Wars best friend of 25 years, and we are talking about
That just makes us sound old.
That's right, Mike. We are old, and you know what? We're so old, we're talking about a book that we read 20 years ago. And we reread again recently. And that's right, guys. We're talking about part 2 of the Jedi Academy trilogy, Dark Apprentice. So if you guys were with us last week, we talked about Jedi Search, which was part 1 of the Jedi Academy trilogy. And now we're in part 2. So how are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing good. Yeah. If you missed part 1, stop this, go back to part 1.
Yes, please.
Because it will be pretty confusing jumping into part 2. And now that you said that, I don't know that I've ever actually read this book. I might have way back when. But in preparation for the show today, I just listened to Dark Apprentice on Audible, which was the abridged audiobook version.
Very abridged.
I'm pretty sure I probably read it way back when we were kids. Back in my day, but I definitely did listen to the abridged audiobook to prep for today's episode.
So you probably read this when you're around 10, 11, 12-ish, but not sure. That's around the range I read.
I can picture myself holding the book. It was the gray cover of the
iconic, yeah,
trilogies, yeah. So I had to have read it, but I don't remember a whole lot from reading it way back when. Definitely just got the abridged audiobook version.
You mentioned that gray cover, Mike. So the first one has kind of a copper cover. The second one has a gray cover. And what's really interesting, Mike, and I'm sure you've noticed this as well over the years, but something that always stuck out with me with these books, looking at on my shelf, is on the side of them, they have side characters, not main characters. So the first one, the copper cover, has Lando. The second one with this kind of gray silver color has Akbar. And we're going to get into that in the story in a bit, guys, why Akbar's on the side. But I always thought that was really interesting, Mike, growing up, that Lando and Akbar were featured on the sides. And I won't spoil who's on the third one yet, but it's different. And I like that. And I've got memories of reading this on family vacation with my family on the beach. We were, this is how much of a nerd I was. Actually, quite relaxing. We went to the beach in Florida when I was very young. I was probably about 10 or younger. And I just remember sitting on the beach reading this book and it being really enjoyable, especially the Mon Cala stuff as I'm on the beach. It's like there was a certain ambiance involved there. So super nerd. I love it.
Get your butt in the water, you nerd.
Mm-hmm. My feet were in the water. Don't worry. But
so before we hop into the actual story of Dark Apprentice today, we invite you to check out our Twitter page, Facebook, Instagram, our website, www.thecanoncantina.com. We have a brand new logo, new art, assets, and everything on all of those. It looks great. So want to let Jesse plug the person who helped us out so much with that, because everything looks so much better than it used to. We sort of look like we know what we're doing now. So Jesse, you want to go over that?
Yeah, so if you guys enjoy our new art, I'm sure you've noticed, but if you haven't yet, please take a look at it and let us know what you think. But we have new logo stuff, and we have new headers and footers on all of our social medias, as Mike just mentioned. And all this art is created by Garrett Weinzerl of the nomoonart.com graphic design website. And turns out too, Mike, Garrett is a well-established podcaster of several podcasts. He in fact does podcasts for a living. So it was a great fit. It was incredible to have him working on our stuff, and we really like the results, and we hope you guys do as well.
That's right. So you can see a lot of our new stuff on our social media and website. And he's created some stuff for us that we hope to roll out to the general public very, very soon.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys followed me on the most recent Battlefront stream, but I unveiled the work he did for us on there as well. I had him make me a new overlay for Battlefront, and we have more things he's created for us coming out in the future. But basically, if you guys didn't think we were serious before, we're taking steps to progress with our art and our look, because we hope you guys really enjoy it, and we're trying to create uniformity. And it was really awesome to get a professional on the job, Mike, especially somebody who's experienced not only with art but with podcasts. So thank you again, huge thank you to Garrett. And if you guys like our art, go tell him, or just let us know what you think about it. And you know what, Mike, with this too, I'll tease, we do have future content coming one day that is logo wear and things like that, and stickers and things. We're working on that.
Whoa. Hey, don't let him peek too far behind the curtain. I was just so happy to hear that Garrett is using something other than MS Paint, which is my speciality.
That's me
for doing any of the stuff. So, yeah, I really like our new stuff. He did a great job. So props to him. Check out all of our new stuff at thecanoncantina.com.
And I guess we keep talking about it in vague terms. We could actually talk about it if we wanted to, Mike. But if you guys noticed our new art, well, it has Luke's lightsaber on it. And I think that is probably self-explanatory for you guys at home. But that's Luke's post-Empire lightsaber, the Return of the Jedi lightsaber, the Legends, Shadows of the Empire lightsaber, all that stuff. And we hope you guys enjoyed that, because we're a Luke Skywalker show. I think it makes a little sense. And we did a little bit of Star Wars logo, font, and things like that. So get a look at it and let us know what you think. And a big thank you again to Garrett at No Moon Art. We'll link his stuff in the show notes if you guys want to reach out to him for any future projects, or just let him know what you think. But we really appreciate it, Garrett.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and jump into our story. We're in part 2 of the Jedi Academy trilogy. Dark Apprentice was released in July of 1994, so just a few months after part 1 in 1994. Also written by Kevin J. Anderson, and it pretty much just picked up right where book 1 left off. So this was, if I am remembering correctly, other than the Thrawn trilogy, this was the next big multi-part series of Star Wars novels. Is that right?
That is absolutely right, Mike. And as we said early on, this is one of the only sources of Star Wars Legends EU content back in the day. So this was a really big deal, bigger than it is now, of course, but back then it was a really big deal. And if you guys remember, our last story ended with the giant space battle. And I don't know if we made this clear in the last episode, but as Mike said, Falcon running one way, Sun Crusher running one way, 2 fleets chasing them, which is a really cool scene. But I don't know if we mentioned, Mike, the fleet was a giant Kessel pirate fleet and the Imperial fleet.
I think we did.
And the Imperial fleet. So we got the Imperial fleet, Kessel pirate fleet clashing, the Sun Crusher and the Falcon make it out. And then, of course, Luke has given location of his Jedi Praxeum. He's given the go-ahead from Mon Mothma, and he's given the fourth moon of Yavin 4. And he's sitting on the Masasi Temple, brooding about his students coming, and is he going to be okay? Is he going to do a good job? Is this going to work out? And guess what, Mike? He has about 12 students coming, which is an interesting number, because that's the same number we hear in The Last Jedi. We'll get to that a bit later, but I like that it was 12 again. That's interesting. About a dozen students are the same words that are used.
Yeah. You jumped a little ahead of my show notes there, but that's okay. So the questions that we consider for every news story that we talk about. First one, what state is Luke in as he begins his journey? Second one, how do the events and characters he encounters impact his development as a hero? And then the last one, for our Legends sources, like the one we're reading today, would Luke's experiences in this story make him different than the Luke we meet in Episode 8, The Last Jedi? Jesse, you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Ever since Luke disappeared, people have been looking for him.
I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
A lot of rumors, stories.
And I became a legend.
People that knew him best.
Luke.
Young Skywalker. Luke.
It's all true.
I am a Jedi. Like my father before me.
All of it.
All right, so the book opens. In our first question, what state is Luke in at the beginning of the story? He's riding pretty high, isn't he, Jesse? He's feeling pretty good about himself. You kind of outlined already what he's doing. He's got his Jedi Academy on Yavin 4. He's got himself 12 students, including Gantoris, who he picked up on El Shah, Streen, who he found on Bespin or B-Spin if you
no.
listen to the Anthony Heald narrated audiobook like we did.
That's two. I like this.
And then 10 others. Kip Duran eventually joins them.
Mara Jade. Briefly.
Kip Duran and Mara Jade do eventually join him in this book, yeah. But Luke is riding pretty high, which that's sort of a change from a lot of the stories we've talked about. Sometimes he's like had to learn some hard lessons at the end of previous books or comic runs or whatever we've talked about. But this time he's feeling pretty good. He's like, yeah, I can run a Jedi Academy.
He is, but there's a lot of apprehension with him too. I mean, if you guys remember the way I read that last chapter of the last book, it ends with a lot of fear for Luke. He doesn't know fully what to do. And you know, he is riding high in a way, but Mike, I really liked how this started. One of the first lessons he gives his students on the academy, he basically says, now keep in mind, they say master a lot, master a lot, master. He says, well, keep in mind, I'm really not that far ahead of you guys. And he's very humble about it in a way. He basically says, you know, I only learned these things myself 7 years ago, basically, is what he tells people. And take everything I say with a grain of salt, but everything I say comes from this source, this source, this source, Master Yoda, Master Kenobi, the Chun Thor.
Oh, by the way, I've already been to the dark side and come back.
He does mention that as well. But I don't know, Mike. I really like Luke in this series because he has a lot of apprehension and he has a lot of fear. He has a lot of questions with himself, like, do I know enough to train these 12 different people? And I like that a lot. That's a cool start to the story. And one of the first things they do, Mike, in the book, I'll just start here, is they pop open the holocron from Dark Empire. And we got Master Boss on there, the Cthulhu.
Voodoo Boss.
Cthulhu Master. And really interesting voice, by the way, on the audiobook for this. I was not expecting that. I was expecting a deep Cthulhu voice. So that getting this high kind of frail voice was very interesting. But essentially, Bodo Boss. So the way the holocrons work in these is it's a program, but it's kind of the Jedi Master's essence is in the program. It's like a diary of the Jedi Master, and it's distilled into a computer form in a way. I don't know how to also describe it than that. And it can answer a lot of questions, but it has to distill information, and then it has to kind of answer. It has to go through the Jedi Master's diaries and kind of choose the best response. I don't know how else you would call this, Mike. But they sit there with this holocron, right? And they try to distill information out of it. And what's really interesting about this, Mike, is Luke doesn't even know fully what to do with this holocron, right? At the beginning of the story, he's like, okay, students, let's go to our exercises. Let's move on from the holocron. That was kind of the wrong way to go to start off our day.
Yeah, Luke is kind of acting like a first semester graduate assistant with the textbook for the next level class. He's like, I've read a few chapters of this. Sure, I can teach you guys what we're doing here.
Yeah, I was going to say an AP.
Nothing will go wrong.
Substitute teacher. Like he's clearly better than the regular substitute teacher. But AP, I don't know. I follow you.
As a former AP teacher, I will agree with your sentiment. Very good.
He's not a master yet, even though he's attempting that role because he's the only one who can do it. He's the only person qualified in the galaxy technically to be a Jedi Master at this point. So it puts him in a strange position. But, you know, they don't know how to distill the information from the holocron. They try to ask the holocron information about the dark side and things like that. And the holocron doesn't quite understand, and neither does Luke. So they kind of just like, let's go back to our studies, our standard Ben Kenobi trainings.
Well, and part of their studies is go out and explore this moon that we don't know just a whole lot about.
Which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I've kind of likened the 12 students that Luke has to sort of like an old kind of RPG like video game, how everybody sort of fills a different role. You've got like your bard and your fighter and your wizard and stream,
healer,
and kind of all these other things.
Healers, later,
yeah, exactly. But he's like, he sends the party out to go explore these ancient temples, and one of his most important students is Gantoris, who we met in the last book. We talked about him in our last episode, who was very questioning of Luke when he first met him.
Very
He thought
true.
Luke might bring about his end, but Luke eventually convinced Gantoris to go with him. And Gantoris,
Let's not forget about
has
Gantoris' nightmares in the last book.
he had nightmares in the first book
Of a
about
dark man.
a dark man who would bring about his end. He thought it was Luke. Luke convinced him otherwise. But Gantoris sort of finds this dark man wandering around in the jungles of Yavin 4, doesn't he?
That's right. Gantoris goes on one of these quests Mike's mentioning and discovers another ancient temple on Yavin 4. Turns out there's several. They're created by the Masasi people. And this temple's different, Mike. This temple's completely by itself. Nothing else is around it. It's the dark side of the Force feels strong there. It feels different to the apprentices who don't even know much about the dark side. And that's what Gantoris encounters. And Gantoris encounters some, let's just say, some dark side essence there. You want to start there?
Just a little bit. There's a statue of this guy out front of the temple.
Some old lord. Yeah, we don't know who this effigy to this lord is.
But Gantoris discovers this dark spirit who starts trying to teach him things about the Force. And Gantoris, we're supposed to believe he's this naive, willing to learn student, kind of soaks it all up, even though it sort of corrupts him. And he tries to take it back to Luke. Right?
Yeah, but there's other things that happen too. Let's not forget. I guess this ties back to the rest of the galaxy with Gantoris, but you guys remember Admiral Dalla from the last time? Admiral Dalla is now actually taking action to lead the Empire. We mentioned last time she had a small fleet in the Kessel Run Maw installation. Now she's doing guerrilla runs against the entire galaxy. She's kind of making the New Republic scared, Mike. And one of the first things she does is she does a full orbital bombardment and kind of desecration of Gantoris's people, because if you remember last book, Gantoris's people were moved to Dantooine, and Dalla figures this information out
to the old rebel base.
That's right. Dalla figures this information out, and she kind of makes an example of these people. It's really sad because they just kind of set up a community and they're happy. Leia kind of gave him all these resources. Leia gave him,
and there was literally
things.
only like 50 of them,
and they're all destroyed by Dalla's Star Destroyers. Meanwhile, Dalla continues to do this all over the galaxy, and eventually she attacks Mon Cala, the Mon Calamari homeworld. But before that, she does this to Gantoris' people, and this actually creates more dark side turmoil for Gantoris, and I think that's probably important to mention.
Yeah, you're right. It creates a lot of conflict within him, which makes him more accepting to this dark side spirit.
It makes him doubt
sort
Luke.
of learning from. Yeah, it makes him doubt Luke and more accepting of this other influence. And Gantoris tries to bring this information back to Luke. He builds a lightsaber before any of the other students under the guidance of this dark spirit and tries to fight Luke.
It's pretty intense. Yeah, he kind of built his own lightsaber. The book describes it as him staying up like all night, and he's kind of possessed by some sort of madness. Luke's trained nothing.
Staying up all night, possessed by some sort of madness. I take a look at the clock here and look at what we're doing. Oh, hey, we're kind of doing the same thing, aren't we?
That's definitely us. Luke has given the Jedi apprentices no training on how to create a lightsaber yet. So this is pretty interesting, Mike. And Gantoris comes to the next day of training and basically says, "Fight me, Master Skywalker." Turns on his lightsaber, and Luke's like, "Where did you get that?" Like, Luke's thinking that Gantoris just got it from somewhere, right? And then Gantoris basically verbalizes to him, "I have more powers than you. I've been training on my own. I built my own
a fair
lightsaber."
bit of villain monologuing.
Yeah.
If you have seen The Incredibles, he's doing some pretty stereotypical villain monologuing.
He's slapping that ponytail around as he's doing this. I mean, he's into it. And Luke is just so taken aback because Luke's already like, "Gantoris, is this about your people? Like, do you still mistrust me? Because I told you I'd have your people a special place, and then the Empire struck, and do you blame me for that?" And he's just like, "You're not the teacher for me. You're not right. And
you're not the boss of me."
Yeah, and he basically attacks Luke, Mike, and he says, "Fight me." So Luke, last second, activates his lightsaber and deflects a blow and almost dies to Gantoris' new lightsaber. And they have a duel.
Yeah, and to Luke's credit, he does his best to adhere to what Yoda says. A Jedi uses the Force for defense.
Yeah, knowledge and
not
defense.
attack.
Yeah,
He's not trying to
Not at
attack
all.
or hurt Gantoris. He's trying to defend himself, yet disarm Gantoris in a way where he can make this a teachable moment. Because Luke is trying to figure out, how did you get influenced by the dark side so quickly?
right.
And what can I do to fix it? And then in the middle of the fight, Gantoris makes his lightsaber twice as long.
Right. Looks like, oh, not only did he make a lightsaber, but he made some mods to his lightsaber.
He made a complicated lightsaber that has like 2 different blade lengths.
Right.
Or
Has
whatever.
another kyber crystal that feeds more energy into it and it extends longer. And yeah, the color
like,
changes
Luke
too, by
ends
the
up-
way. That's
Luke ends up jumping into a tree, and Gantoris is like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna cut this tree down." Makes his lightsaber twice as long, cuts the tree down.
looks like what? Yeah, pretty cool there. The lightsaber changes, by the way, Mike, from if I remember, silverish hues, whitish silverish hues to purplish hues. So we kind of got the white-ish lightsaber into a purple lightsaber. Take that, Mace Windu.
Well, I'm colorblind anyway, so I don't remember it.
Well, take that, Sam Jackson, having your own purple lightsaber. But
I see where you're taking.
Yeah.
that. Nice.
I do like that the lightsaber changes colors depending on the length because it the crystals are changing focus, and that's just a cool thematic thing, if anything. And Luke and Gantoris continue to fight. And you said dark side, Mike. I don't even know if Luke knows is the dark side yet. Does that make sense? I don't think he does.
I think Luke would have to be an absolute moron to not, like, if he doesn't sense it, like, just intellectually infer, there's some dark side influence here if one of my best, newest students is attacking me with a lightsaber that I didn't teach him how to build.
That's true. So what happens at the end of this duel, Mike? You wanna spoil it? I mean, the tree. The tree.
It's not spoiling it. Like, after
I
the
know.
whole tree incident, Luke basically just uses the Force to rip the lightsaber out of Gantoris' hand. He's like, okay, look, I am better at the Force.
I
than
promise.
you. Let's pump the brakes, Gantoris. Let's go back and talk and figure out what's going on.
Right.
Gantoris goes all emo and is like, I'm going back to my room. And blah, 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 blah. So Luke is like, hey, let's talk about this tomorrow.
Right.
We'll figure out this dark side business that you might have found or whatever.
I enjoyed this, Mike, because all the other apprentices are pretty disturbed, and Luke kind of just has to console everybody and say, okay, the Academy's been going fine. We've been doing generic Ben Kenobi lessons, but this escalated quickly. Everyone just go to your room for the night. We're taking a night off. We're taking a night off. Everyone go rest, and we'll reconvene tomorrow.
Yeah, Luke has to convince the other 11, don't worry about what you just saw. It didn't take less than a week for someone to turn to the dark side. No big deal.
Well,
so
it's a rude awakening to the next day.
It's a very rude awakening because I think Luke is the first person to find Gantoris the next morning. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Gantoris struggles with his dark side spirit overnight back in his room at the Jedi Academy dorm, and
Praxeum.
He's only burned from the inside out and killed by this dark side spirit. And I think it's Luke that's the first one to come across his body, right? Or what's left of his body?
Jedi students. So yeah, he was discovered by some other students.
Okay, so some students discover him first, and then Luke ends up coming to.
Yeah, I think Luke senses it when he first wakes up in the morning. So it's kind of the same difference. Like Luke senses something's severely wrong, but incinerated from the outside, like from the inside out. Mike, this is pretty grim for Star Wars.
It is pretty grim for Star Wars, even considering other material between 1994 and now. But yeah, Gantoris was consumed from the inside out by a dark side spirit that he was fighting with. They even describe him as, like, they see what's left of his body in like a defensive position, like he was trying to ward off something.
Here's what's cool about this, Mike. This shakes Luke to his core, and
cool.
I think this is good to talk about, right? All I was gonna say is Luke's confidence in his skills teaches the Jedi trainees is completely destroyed and shook this moment onward. And Luke's like, should I even be doing this? And that's pretty interesting this early on.
You say that, and I don't disagree with you, because Luke is definitely shaken by this. And if you ask him, hey, Luke, how did your first week as teacher at the Jedi Academy go? Well, I lost one of my 12 students to the dark side, and he was burned up from the inside
Pretty
out.
bad.
It's not a very good report. But Luke doesn't exactly change anything. He doesn't do anything differently after losing a student literally to the dark side. He isn't like, hey, I need to step back and examine my methods, or maybe we don't use a holocron, or, oh, hey, maybe he found something that was really scary out there in the forest on Yavin 4. Luke doesn't actually change anything. He's like, we'll just push past this. We'll be fine.
This is where we get into the abridged and non-abridged and all that stuff, right?
So elaborate on that for a second for the listeners who don't quite know exactly what you mean.
I don't know, Mike. I wish I could fully depict it, but I guess the abridged audiobook of this was about 2.5 hours?
I think it was about 3.
Yeah. So right under 3 or right under 3. And the typical Star Wars audiobook that's unabridged is 9 to 12 hours. That gives you an idea of the difference between abridged and unabridged. And all abridged is it's the key points of the story without all the fluff, without all the character development, without all the extra dialogue that doesn't really necessarily forward major plot points. And sometimes you lose minor scenes, like minor characters interacting with each other and stuff. So a good part to mention now is, so something Mike and I did this time was we both listened to the audiobook. I read half of this book going through, Mike, and I finished the rest on audiobook. And it was a pretty stark difference for me. The amount of characterization with Luke and his students. It was very brief in the audiobook, but very fleshed out in the book. So that's what I mean by abridged and non-abridged. So Luke's not that quick.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It doesn't happen that quick. But if we're saying the abridged version, the audiobook hits the major story points,
does for the most part.
Even after the fluff that you get from reading the book, Luke doesn't actually change anything. He does decide to just kind of power through, and it's like, well, I lost one. Hope that doesn't happen again.
Well, he kind of takes a break. He kind of says, like, let's put this on hold and let's stop for a couple weeks. And if I remember correctly, Mike, Mara Jade comes to the Jedi Praxeum finally. She joins the group. And she kind of...
I don't think she shows up till later.
If I remember correctly, she's the one who kind of encourages him to continue forward when he's kind of thinking about quitting. Not fully quitting, but he's basically thinking about putting on hold indefinitely till they figure out the Gantoris...
I thought Kip got there before she did.
They get there around the same time, but yeah, I mean, this is a good time to mention Kip because the story is going to take a whole nother turn with Kip. So if you guys remember Kip from the last storyline, he's been with Han this entire time. Han's kind of been integrating Kip into the real world. I don't know how to describe it, Mike, but Kip's been in the mines.
I know how... Living in a ski resort town, I know how to describe it.
Go for it.
So even in the abridged audiobook, so Han Solo has rescued Kip Duran, this Jedi prodigy from the spice mines of Kessel.
Book 1.
And he wants to integrate him into society. So he takes them to this weird planet where they basically hover snow ski over frozen waterfalls.
And Han gives him like dad
stuff.
advice, basically.
He does give him like dad advice. It's not very good to listen to in the audiobook. But Kip eventually makes his way to the Jedi Academy, but he doesn't arrive until after Gantoris is gone.
That's right.
So he shows up at kind of a dark time.
Him and Mara both show up, and they're kind of like, what's going on? Why is everybody so somber? Is kind of our jumping off point we were talking about. And guess what? Mara's back, though in the abridged audiobook, very brief.
Well, and I am usually the one to push us forward and keep the focus on Luke, but I'm going to actually make us jump back to talk about some of the other stuff that happens in this book.
There's a lot. There's a lot.
Well, yeah. Well, there's a lot. And again, we're going to keep most of the focus on Luke, but listening to the audiobook again, I did come up with some things to say for some of these other side characters.
Well, there's side plots about the New Republic, right? which is, I think, what you're probably getting at, Mike, because
yeah,
if you guys listen to our show, we've kind of always given the claim that we focus on Luke, but we're going to give you the greater Star Wars story through the timeline, and the New Republic is a big part of that.
Yeah, and the New Republic has a very severe talent management problem.
Uh-oh.
So one of the major threads in this book is that Admiral Akbar decides to escort Leia to the planet Vortex for a diplomatic mission.
Very similar to Leia's mission in the Thrawn trilogy. If you remember, she went and spoke with the bird people. Almost identical to that in a way.
But Admiral Akbar does not trust anyone else to fly her there.
Okay.
So he flies her in his personal B-Wing fighter to this planet that's named Vortex and has all sorts of crazy wind patterns. Right. And basically what happens is Akbar crashes his B-Wing into a giant...
diplomatic...
it's like a diplomatic and like crystal like organ. It's like a life-size organ that the
it's rough.
Beings on the planet Vortex...
worship.
It's described in a very cool way.
Yeah.
Like these beings like create once in a lifetime songs in these like temple organ places. But Akbar crashes through one of these and destroys it and kills a lot of people.
Right. And him and Leia almost die, but they do survive.
Him and Leia almost die, but they do survive. But my biggest problem with that is Akbar said he didn't trust anyone else to pilot Leia to this planet because of the winds on this planet that made landing conditions horrible. I'm sorry. You know who Han Solo, the best pilot in the galaxy, is. You know who Luke Skywalker, the Jedi Master in the galaxy, is.
Both
you know
Leia's
who Lando
confidants.
Calrissian, the second best pilot in the galaxy, is. You know who Wedge Antilles is, who has survived both Death Stars so far, who is relegated to bodyguard duty, which is a horrible use of his skill set in this book. He's relegated to bodyguard and half-assed love interest of Quizooks.
The scientist from the
Akbar
previous book.
knows so many people who are better pilots than him, yet he only trusts himself to take Leia to this planet. I realize that's like kind of meta thinking about the whole thing.
And you really want me to answer this, Mike? All right, here we go. Han is dadding Kip and making sure Kip integrates with the world and doesn't go psycho. Luke is on the Jedi Temple leading Jedi, right?
Those two are perfectly legit.
Lando is rewatching his YouTube videos from the blob races.
Lando's doing nothing other than winning back the Falcon
and the
from
blob
Han
races
for 20 minutes in a useless game of Sabacc.
Yeah, and as you said,
there's no reason for Wedge to be relegated to bodyguard duty.
He is. So Akbar's like, it has to be me.
So Akbar knows at least 4 people who are among the best pilots in the galaxy.
Chewbacca?
Who could have done this instead of him. And Chewie. My God, I usually like stand for Chewie so hard. I didn't even
General
bring him up
Chewbacca.
yeah, so he knows a bunch of people who are better pilots than him.
But guess what, Mike? We got to move on past that because guess what? This book wants to characterize Admiral Akbar, and I'm into that. And this is how they start doing it. This is their it might be a cheap way, but it's how they get him involved in the story.
I like that they tried to bring Akbar into this main character fold. I'm not disagreeing with that.
We'll see more of this in the future.
Was like, really, your reasoning is you think you're the best pilot when like I can name 7 or 8 people that you know personally that are better pilots than you. Anyway, it is a good attempt to
characterize,
bring Akbar into the main fold. And this is probably the origin of people who are mad at how Akbar died in The Last Jedi.
That's me.
Are you seriously mad about that?
Mad is not the right word.
Okay, so we've covered Akbar and Leia and their side plot. Lando wins the Falcon back from Han in a card game, but only for like an hour and a half or some BS like that. What else am I missing in terms of important side plots?
Dala attacks Mon Cala. So we've been talking about Mon Cala now, and I got to mention again, Mike, once again, it's a similar plot story from the Thrawn trilogy, but they use it again. I think it works because we like Akbar, but essentially Akbar steps down from his duties in the New Republic because of this accident he did on this religious planet for, these people, like you just mentioned. And he goes back to Mon Cala, but guess what? Mon Cala is under attack by Dala, and Leia goes to get Akbar back on Mon Cala. And Leia meets a new character, which is going to be very important, not only in Luke's Jedi Academy, but all books to come. Leia meets a female Mon Calamari, which is awesome. Her name is Silgal, and she has a different color and look than Akbar. They spend a whole lot of time describing that she looks and acts different from the male Mon Calamaris, which is cool. And she takes Leia to Akbar, but Leia has a suspicion that Silgal has an innate ability potentially for the Force. And she kind of calls Luke and recommends Silgal to Luke's Jedi Praxeum as well. But they Leia and Silgal do find Akbar.
And Luke responds to that call from Leia like, ha ha ha, everything's fine. No, we definitely still have 12 students here. Everything's fine. Go ahead and send her.
The fish lady? Okay. Don't let her build her own lightsaber. She can join us. The application has changed quickly. It's rough. But yeah, Leia and Silgal do find Akbar, which I find really cool, Mike. So we had some world building. We see Leia swim on Mon Cala, very similar to the way Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon swim and the Phantom Menace, that she has a rebreather that's from the Mon Cala people.
There is some great world building here. You're absolutely
and
right.
They go down to the Mon Cala people live underwater, the Corran live underwater, and they go to Akbar's apartment, which is underwater, and that's fun. And Leia tries to get him back. She's like, Dala is out of control, come back.
And this eventually leads to a conflict between Admiral Akbar commanding the Mon Calamari System Defense Forces against Admiral Dala, but we're not going to give you the details of it. Go read the book or listen to the audiobook to get those. Because while all of this is going on, back at Luke's Jedi Academy, he just saw one of his students burn from the inside out. And as is fitting, he has a nightmare the next day
of this dark man that's been plaguing Gantoris this whole time. And we can assume this dark man was the one that killed Gantoris now. And Luke has this really interesting nightmare. Mike, this book is one of the more interesting things we've covered on the show so far, Luke content-wise. So Luke has a nightmare about his father coming to him and telling him that Obi-Wan was wrong. Right. Obi-Wan was a liar. Obi-Wan bent the truth, which is true. But Obi-Wan bent the truth
from a certain point of view.
And he tells Luke that in order to become a full, powerful Jedi Master, Luke needs to embrace all sides of the Force, and he needs to ignore Obi-Wan's teachings and kind of reach out and embrace the dark side and the light side and, become what he's destined to become. And then Anakin slowly turns into the dark figure of the dark man, and Luke figures it out. And
that's right. As this nightmare goes on, Luke notices
Anakin's not looking at
this guy's kind of fading into this dark figure. You're not actually the vision of my father, are you? And then once the dark vision realizes, ha ha ha, I'm haunting you. My name is Exar Kun. Exarkun, which Anthony Heald, who narrated the audiobook, inexplicably pronounces as Exarkeen. Every time. It drove me crazy listening.
So, Mike, I don't know about you, but I've always heard it pronounced as Exarkun.
Yeah,
Exarkun. And what's interesting? Before we get too much into Exarkun, I got to mention this is our first time I think we've fully connected ghost stuff in our show. But if you guys remember Truce of Bakura, Anakin actually came to Leia and spoke to her, and that was actually Anakin. So, and Anakin is
good.
Anakin has never spoken to Luke. So for Anakin to come to Luke and it actually turn into this Sith Lord, the Dark Man, which now we know is Exarkun, is very interesting and very manipulative. And Exarkun is an old Sith Lord, Mike, that lived on Yavin 4 and kind of enslaved the Masasi people.
Yeah, so we're given some context through this nightmare and through the holocron as the story goes on. Basically, Exarkun was ancient Voldemort.
That's right.
He was a Sith Lord, made his home on the fourth moon of Yavin, and when the rest of the Jedi banded together to defeat him, he absorbed the life force of every single one of the Massassi people, the people who built the temples that we see in Rogue One and A New Hope. He sort of used them as like Horcruxes, basically, to trap his spirit in a way that he might someday come back.
Pretty dark stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, Mike, I know this is...
So the Massassi people are the original Horcruxes.
This is pretty sci-fi, and this is pretty fantasy too, but I actually like Exar Kun's story a lot better than the stuff with the Emperor.
Exar Kun.
I like the stuff with Exar Kun a lot better than the reborn Palpatine. Like the spirit of Exar Kun.
Well,
because
that's not hard.
No, it's not hard,
okay,
but I like the
you.
idea of Exar Kun essentially dying, but his spirit's still hanging around, similar to how Obi-Wan and Anakin hang around to give Luke guidance, but this is a Sith Lord still hanging around, and he's having influence over students and Luke, and we also see that he can affect the physical world, but guess what, Mike? That's what Yoda does in The Last Jedi. So we know now that Force Ghost can affect the physical world, and he affects the physical world by, we assume, making Sith lightning happen inside Gantors's body, which is so grim and so dark. And he's tormenting Luke now via nightmares. And now Luke Luke already had doubts about his teachings on the Jedi Academy. Now Luke is dealing with a Sith Force Ghost.
So what does Luke do differently? Nothing. He doesn't tell anybody about
He's
this.
terrified.
He's doesn't change up any of his teaching methods. Luke does essentially defeat Exar Kun in his nightmare.
Yeah.
He's not tempted by
he
the
pushes
dark
them
side
away, yeah.
because he's already been there. But basically, the very next day, his Mary Sue Jedi prodigy Kip Duran shows up. And in our last episode, I called Kip Duran the original Mary Sue like people called Rey a Mary Sue, and I was wrong. Kip Duran is the original Kylo Ren of the Legends continuity.
Yes, Mike. I don't know if you've heard this thrown around a lot, but I have in the Legends circles. But Kylo is a lot of Kip, a lot of Anakin, and a lot of Jason Solo from Legends. And turns out he's a lot more Kip than I remember.
You take 3 a-holes and you put them in one character.
You get one,
and you notice some similarities.
You get one emo boy. So
super emo boy.
So Kip just happens to be the first, other than Anakin, of course, on the prequels, but Kip happens to be the first source of people's mentions of this. But you're right. We'll get to Jason later. And I don't want to spoil too much of that. And Jason turns out is a lot more interesting character than Kip. That's just my opinion, but I think it's probably true. I think because the text fleshes out Jason more, and that's true. But Kip comes to the Jedi Temple finally, and we mentioned that Silgal. So now Leia's Mon Cala she found, the female Mon Calamari, has a... So Silgal's cool because Silgal actually doesn't really have a lot of the typical Jedi powers, but she has a really interesting power of healing, Mike. So she's the healer in the party, like you mentioned. And Luke kind of helps her home that ability, even though Luke tells her very clearly, I don't know much about Jedi healing. And Luke kind of tells her that. He goes, but clearly you have a gift. And then Kip comes and Mara Jade comes, and Mara Jade promptly leaves, which is funny. And she doesn't stay long. But Kip comes and he starts...
No, she stays.
Like, she when I say she leaves, she didn't say super long, right? She stays.
No, she stays because Kip steals her ship.
That's right. So Kip is excelling at everything, right? Before that,
Mara Jade gets stranded on Yavin.
She wants to leave.
I guess I'll go learn from Skywalker. And she wanted to leave, but she gets stuck there.
But Kip is excelling at everything. Let's start there.
He's excelling at all of Luke's teachings. And again, we listened to the 3-hour abridged audiobook instead of the 11-hour fully detailed one. So I know that some nuance was lost in there. But Kip basically turns to the dark side because Exar Kun tells him it's cool.
Exar Kun basically says, like, aren't you more advanced than Skywalker? And Kip's like, yeah, I think I am. And which is probably true, Mike, in some ways. And he says, well, just follow me. I'll give you more power. I'll give you more like abilities than you ever imagined, and you'll exceed Skywalker, and you can't deny me. And what's funny about Kip, Mike, is I don't know if you caught this even in the abridged version, but Kip kind of does the weird Dark Empire Luke thing. He's like, well, I'm a good guy, but like, I might as well accept this dark side power because I'm the only one who can take this on. I'm the only one who can fully resist this true bad guy, Exar Kun. And guess what? Eventually, I'll use all these dark side powers to make the universe a better place, which is very Anakin-esque, right? I'm going to make the world right, and I'm going to return back to being light side. And this was just like a brief stint. This is like a brief drug stint. You know what I mean? That's kind of how he treats the dark side.
Yeah,
he tries to be good.
That's what he is telling.
Yeah, he's telling himself that.
That's his rationalization for turning.
But he's full of raw power, similar to Kylo and Anakin. Actually, he's just full of raw power of the Force, and that is bad. That's bad.
Yeah. Well, in the way he executes this plan, if you remember from our last episode, we described the Sun Crusher as sort of a starship-sized Starkiller base that could destroy an entire system with a single built-in weapon by destroying the star or the sun for that system. The New Republic was like, oh, hey, this is bad. Let's put it in the center of this gas giant Yavin, which is right next to this Jedi moon, Yavin 4. Kip Duran, being the dark side genius that he is, pulls the Sun Crusher out of the gas giant of Yavin 4, which is very video game-esque, and I mean, I admit, it's kind of cool.
That's cool.
Like 90s style. And he
clearly has the power
decides to pilot
with Exar Kun too.
Yeah.
Helping him.
He decides to pilot the Sun Crusher, and what he's telling himself is an attempt to destroy the Empire. He's like, I'm going to go destroy Admiral Dala and all these other bad people with the Sun Crusher because it's the most efficient way to do it.
Yeah, he's kind of taking this like, woe is me. Like, I'm going to do all the bad things so people can live, because he already knows what happened to Gantor's people. He doesn't want any other innocents to die. So his thinking is, I'm going to take the fight to the bad guys. I'm going to do all the bad things. I'm going to become the murderer, but other people are going to live in the future. It's kind of the Spock thing, Mike, in a dark way. It's a dark twist on the
super dark
Spock. Needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. He takes that to the extreme. But guess what, Mike? We know how this goes with the dark side. Exar Kun takes that idea Kip has and just sends the dark side all through him, and it gets out of control quickly.
So Kip takes the fight to Admiral Dala. He destroys one of her Star Destroyers, and he's going to do some more damage. I don't think this is a spoiler because it's a guy that's gone to the dark side with near unlimited
and a super
power.
weapon on top of that.
Yeah. But after he attacks Admiral Dala, he's like, you know what? I'm going to go back to the Jedi Academy. I need to tell Skywalker what's what.
Yeah, and a lot of this is under Exar Kun's control. But you're right, Mike. He goes back to the Jedi Academy, and this is kind of like one of the final parts of the book. But Kip goes back and faces Luke, similar to Gantor's at the beginning of the book. How Gantor's kind of challenged Luke. But this time, Luke is not ready. Luke is not aware that Kip is fully under the influence of Exar Kun. The first time, Gantor's caught him off guard because he's like, wait, you have a lightsaber and you think you're better than me? This is essentially Kip being supercharged.
You think you're better than me?
Kip is literally Super Saiyan mode because he's essentially Kip, which is, we talked about, just raw force power, and he's almost possessed by the spirit. He's kind of his moves are being dictated by this Sith Force ghost, and they have a conflict. It's in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and well, it's a conflict in the middle of the night, and it ends with Luke getting his ass kicked.
That's right,
and trapped inside of his own body and a quarter of his mind. So essentially, Kip decides not to kill Luke. He's using the dark side of the Force to trap Luke's essence or mind or whatever within his own body, so that Luke's students find him the next day and are like, well, he's not dead, but he's not exactly here either.
This is why Silgal exists in the story, Mike, because she's the healer and she can sense Luke's essence in the Force still in his body, and she can sense like a temperature basically, but nothing else is working. Nothing else is there. He's essentially hanging on by a thread, and Luke is laying.
He's got minimal brain activity.
Luke is laying on the ground, unmoving, not even breathing, and his lightsaber is tossed aside because Luke was confronted in the night by Kip and Exar Kun, the Sith Lord, and he lost, even though he tried his best to defend the temple, and they left with the Sun Crusher. And the book ends, Mike, with the Jedi apprentices, about 10 now, right? and the 10 apprentices basically saying, Master Skywalker's gone. What do we do next? And the book ends.
Well, and it's hilarious because it's not like Master Skywalker is gone and dead forever. It's like Master Skywalker is here in this body somewhere, but he is also gone.
It's like worse than him being dead.
Back?
It's like for them, because they're like, he's like forever, I don't know, like frozen by the dark side, or they don't know what he is yet, but they just know that they have very minimal training. They have essentially weeks, months of training at best. And they're left with nothing, Mike. And there's the Sith Lord out there with now a new Sith apprentice in a way. Kip is the new Sith apprentice, and they don't know what to do. They just know that Gantoris is dead and Kip is gone with the Sun Crusher, and it's bad.
So as we've mentioned, we listened to the abridged audiobook version, so a lot of nuance is lost. But Luke essentially in this story went from riding high, I started my brand new school, to, oh crap, I lost 2 of my 12 students to the dark side, and one of them kicked my butt and trapped me inside my own body in the corner.
Luke has a lot of regrets. Luke fails hard in this, and I find it really interesting.
You could say he has a lot of regrets, yeah. And we talked about the Akbar side plot. There's also a fairly interesting side plot with Lando and Han and ownership of the Falcon. Mon Mothma has an interesting side plot about her health.
Stuff, yeah.
Stuff about Mon Cala. So go check out the actual book to learn all of those details. We tried to keep our focus on Luke.
There's so much. There's so much.
Yeah, so jumping back to our questions, how do the events and characters Luke encounters impact his development as a hero? Well, in this story, he gets his butt kicked a lot.
That's true. But he also has a lot of students that are different, Mike, in the story, which I like a lot. The way he interacts with these different students. Let's not forget, we haven't mentioned them yet in the story, but Luke has some new Jedi. He has old man Jedi. He has old Witch of Dathomir Jedi. He has Mon Cala Jedi. He has brooding emo boy Jedi. He has a lot of different Jedi that he's training, and there's a lot of interactions in this book where Luke has with individual students, and he has to not only teach them differently, but he has to treat them differently and interact with them differently because they're different people. And I actually like that a lot in the story. And Luke's kind of struggles of being, like you said, a teacher. That's what being a teacher is. Yeah. Even just a school teacher, you have so many different students that are all different people, and that's really interesting.
How would you know? I'm just kidding. That's fine. Does Luke have any interactions with the main cast beyond R2 in this book? I don't think so.
Just Leia a couple times. She's like, "Hey, I'm sending a Jedi over. Hey, this happened with the New Republic." But no, he's too busy.
But
with the
not
story.
Any like significant plot points or whatever.
The story. You're right.
Well, so one of our like internal questions is, how does Luke grow in the Force?
Oh,
and I don't know that he does. I just wrote down the greatest teacher failure is, because Luke fails all the time in this book.
No, he does. And I think maybe Luke doesn't grow in the Force, but he grows in his knowledge because he meets other people that experience the Force in different ways. Like we talked about, Streen in the previous episode has an insane heightened empathy with the Force that Luke doesn't have. Silgal can actually heal people's cells in their body. She's a healer. These are things that Luke knows how to do, but not on the level that these people do. So like, as Mike said, these people have min-maxed areas on their RPG sheet, and Luke is kind of the
I love
Luke is he's stagnant all across in a good way. Luke's like, he's a solid across everything. Luke can do a little bit of healing. He can do empathy. He can do all these things. He can reach out. He can do telekinesis. But then he has certain students that excel in certain ways. And it's also a way for this book to make the characters, more than just their personalities, be different. And so Luke learns through the Force, oh, not everyone's different how they use the Force, and not everyone's talents are manifested the same way. And I have to learn how to be a teacher through that. And I like that too in the story.
And oh my God, I can still get my butt kicked by a teenager influenced by a dark side
Sith Lord, ancient
Sith Lord spirit or whatever.
And the last question is, would Luke's experiences in this story make him different from the Luke Skywalker we eventually meet in the canonical Last Jedi?
That's a hard one.
It's hard
in this story.
It's very hard because clearly there's veins of this story that are very similar to the story we're given in The Last Jedi, but obviously not this story, right? So this is our first time we've had a pure... I think this is our first time we've had a pure, like, point-for-point story to look at, which is a whole nother thing we haven't encountered yet.
I think you're right. And just looking at The Last Jedi, so Luke takes his 12 students, he makes a training Jedi temple, and he notices that, oh, crap, my nephew has been influenced by a dark side user to be the darkest, most dangerous person I have ever encountered.
This is pretty unbelievable. And then, like, what you're going over right now, just listening to it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And that's consistent in both these stories.
And in a flashing moment of weakness, Luke is like, if I kill him now, I will save the galaxy. Right. But then in his shame, he doesn't do it. But that's not how it's viewed from Ben Solo / Kylo Ren's perspective. Right. And that leads to the downfall of Ben Solo, him becoming Kylo Ren, working for Snoke and all that stuff. It's all very good. And that's not very different than...
Not at all, really.
Luke Skywalker in his Jedi Academy here. Although I think maybe one of the biggest differences between Luke in this book and Luke in The Last Jedi is, in The Last Jedi, Luke's failure causes him to actually do something. It might not be the right thing, but Luke's failure that results in the death of the rest of his students is like, oh, I need to go reevaluate what we're doing, and he decides the Jedi need to end. When Gantoris died, Luke didn't really decide to do anything differently. And so far, when Kip has turned to the dark side, Luke just kind of got his butt kicked and trapped inside his own body.
Way the book, you're right, he's pretty complacent with Gantoris, but I don't think Luke is very aware of Kip's fall and the path Kip takes to the last second. And what's interesting about Luke in the story is he puts it all together in the last second, Mike, and that's the last second before he's frozen, like, and not a person anymore. But what I like about these stories is the skeletons of these stories are exactly the same. The skeletons. And I do really enjoy that. And, you know, we talked about, we're like 25 episodes in now, Mike, fully, including our bonus episodes and stuff. And like
23. Oh yeah.
Yeah, 25. Yeah. And this is our first time we've come to a pure comparison plot point, not just an essence thing, or would this Luke be like this Luke, or would this? And what's so crazy is these skeletons are exactly the same. And this should not be a point of contention for people. This should be a point of pride for people, in my opinion. Someone that grew up on Legends and somebody that now watches all the new sequel films, like, you should see this and say, oh my gosh, like, they're taking what I always say, they're taking the meat and trimming the fat, right? And distilling it down to a simpler story of all this legend stuff, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 books, right? And they're taking what they like and distilling it down, but the skeleton is very similar. And to me, my favorite part of Legends always has been Luke starting his own Jedi Praxeum and what happens after that point onward. And they took that plot point and kept it the same. Obviously went a different direction with it, maybe slightly or a lot. But the point is the Jedi Praxeum, 12 students, it ends in failure initially. where does Luke go from there? That's where the stories are going to diverge. We're going to see with the rest of our Legends stuff, but I don't think that's a point of contention. I think that's a point of pride. Like, I think if you like Legends and you like the movies, like, you just say, okay, you know what I mean? It's kind of like old Thrawn and new Thrawn.
Well, and I think where a lot of that contention comes from is the Legends fanboys did not get to see the formation of that Jedi
And I'm right
Academy.
there with them. I get a lot of that. I get
it
that.
was just told in backstory. Well, you're wrong, and it was fine the way it was.
No. I'm not wrong. I can still want Jedi Academy stuff. That doesn't mean it's right for the story, but I can still want that. And you probably want that too, right? You wouldn't mind.
We may get it in flashbacks. I think 9. We might. Who knows?
Or at least verbally told, right?
But I actually like how Luke in the movies is so moved by his first failure that things change, and he realizes that the legacy of the Jedi is failure. That's not quite the exact quote, but you know what I'm talking about. As opposed to, well, Gantoris died. Well, Kip's gone to the dark side. Well, and this is sort of a spoiler. He's going to lose several more students to the dark side in his Jedi Academy in Legends,
or at least to ambivalence. To
ambivalence or the dark side. And to me, that's a bigger sign of failure than responding to the very first one, who happened to be close to him family-wise in Ben Solo.
That's true. Yeah. But you get what I'm saying with when I say trimming the fat, right? Like,
no, I absolutely agree.
Cinematic,
it took away the Gantoris part, and
trim Gantoris, Kip, Jason Solo. Spoiler alert going forward. There's the word for you, Mike. All into one, like that. That is trimming the fat. That is taking the essence of these stories, and that is respecting Legends, because you could have just said Luke never started Jedi Academy. You could have just, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think people just hated seeing it. Was it Rashomon style? Right. The 3 different viewpoints, the one person, the other person, then somewhat towards the middle, instead of actually just seeing Luke build his Jedi Academy. But the movies are more interesting this way.
No, it's really interesting, Mike, and we're going to examine more of this in the next story, and we're going to examine a lot more of this and more Legends content. But like, this is the starting point right here. This is the starting point where like the canon stuff takes what it likes, the Legend stuff goes a different way. The canon stuff distills it down to trimmed fat. We're at the moment. This is it.
That's true. This is kind of like our divergent point between the two timelines.
Pretty big for us. Pretty big for us.
And what's fun is I don't remember the details of Book 3, Champions of the Force. I haven't listened to it yet. I will in the next week or so before we record. So I don't actually remember how this story, the details of how this story concludes. Like I
have a huge cheeky grin on my face because there's one more book.
The good guys win, the bad guys lose, whatever.
There's one more book that fleshes out, especially book 2 and 3. It's called I Jedi. I really appreciate the listener that mentioned this. Micah on the Facebook mentioned us doing I Jedi, which is essentially the the spiritual 4th book of this trilogy, Mike.
I fought with Jesse for 2 weeks saying we shouldn't do that book. But here you are saying, oh yeah, I Jedi is good. And fine, we'll do it. If you
really want to just examine the middle part, Mike, where it's on the Jedi Temple, we can just do that. You don't have to look at the whole book.
We'll see how we decide to do that.
We'll get back to that. But you're right. Champions of the Force and I Jedi are going to flesh this out more. And we're here, Mike. We have a Sith Lord involved. Luke is gone. So this is a really interesting point to stop the story. And I think this is a great way to finish Act 2. This book might be a little bit less Star Wars. It might go a little too many places. It might overstep its reach in some places. But like, what I like about these books, Mike, which we've talked about a little bit the last episode, but they don't really. Same with the Thrawn trilogy. They don't overextend too much. They kind of focus on a couple things and they stay there, and that's good. That's really
well. And to give a little more context to that, we haven't talked about a lot of these things. We did not talk about Wedge and Quizooks. We didn't talk about Lando and Han in detail. We didn't talk about baby Anakin and the Imperial Remnant
Baby Anakin,
in detail.
that's right. Little Solo.
We talked most about Leia and Akbar, but there's so much more to that involves Mon Mothma. So you should definitely go check this book out to get the full story. Again, we've just spent a lot longer than I thought we would talking about Luke's involvement in the story.
It's very rich. This trilogy is very exciting. Maybe you want to read it while on the beach. I don't know. But I will say you should listen to this on Audible, guys, if you don't want to read it. And that leads us right into our Audible plug. We've got a new promotion for patrons of the Canon Cantina. You guys have heard it in the last couple episodes. Audible is offering you guys at home a free audiobook download with a 30-day trial, just to give you the opportunity to try out their service. This week, we're recommending one of the earliest episodes of our show. That is Shadows of the Empire by Steve Perry. So I hope you go on Audible and listen to Shadows of the Empire, because if you guys remember early on, that was one of our first episodes. It was our first Legends source. And if you got
our third episode overall.
There you go. And if you enjoyed that at all, that's the book that bridges the gap, the essentially 1 year gap between Empire and Return of the Jedi. And you can get that on Audible, and it's by Steve Perry. And it's a great read. And if you've recently read Shadows of the Empire or just want to try something else on Audible, you can download any other book on there by just trying audible.com. So to download your first free Audible trial, go to audibletrial.com/thecanoncantina. Again, that's audibletrial.com/thecanoncantina for your first free audiobook. And guess what, guys? We're going to tell you here, this is our first sponsor of the show. And if you guys go to this and subscribe to Audible, just the trial through this, it actually benefits us and promotes the show as well. So we really appreciate it.
So our next segment today, we are going to talk about music in Star Wars. We've decided to break down the score in the prequel trilogy. Woo! So we are going to take a quick transition over to this beautiful music by John Williams. Right. So obviously that wasn't John Williams. I just pulled that from YouTube, mainly to mess with Jesse.
That shattered music, me to my core.
Music is a big part of Star Wars films.
I'm not going to recover.
Obviously.
I'm still in shock, Mike, from that.
I even gave him warning before we started.
And then he played it.
The episode.
He just played that, and oh, yeah. The recorder's already the worst sounding instrument on the planet.
So we all know that the score for the original trilogy was composed by the great one himself, right, John Williams. And in the 70s, it was considered not outside of its time, but to put a classical music style score with a sci-fi movie was definitely outside of convention. For the time.
Pretty groundbreaking.
And we all know it's part of what made Star Wars so successful with the original trilogy. And when John Williams came back to do the prequel trilogy starting in 1999, there were some mixed reactions to it.
What do you mean by that? I'm not even sure what you mean by that, but...
mixed reactions in the sense that John Williams did movies throughout the 80s and 90s.
There you go.
But
there you go.
I specifically remember in the early days of message boards and forums or whatever, people not being sure that John Williams would be able to recapture the magic of the original trilogy for the prequel movies.
Okay. Well, and like you said, John had a rocky history at best, especially in the 90s. So that actually makes more sense just looking at his history. Because he had a heyday in the 70s.
We can call the 90s rocky. The 80s, he was still successful. True. There were still the Jaws movies and E.T. and all that stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. So iconic. Yeah, very good stuff. Well, guess what, Mike? I think he knocked it out of the park with the prequels, especially right off the bat with episode 1. So we're going to talk immediately into episode 1. The Phantom Menace. We're going to talk the scores in this movie. We're going to talk what me and Mike like about it, what we don't like about it, what we indifferent. I don't know. Let's just start there. So let's start with the Phantom Menace. Mike, go.
Yeah. So just some fun trivia for the Phantom Menace that passed by me when I was a 6th or 7th grader when this movie came out. There was a spoiler attached to the soundtrack for the Phantom Menace, because there is a track called Qui-Gon's Noble End. And if you haven't seen the movie, you can be like, oh, hey, I bet you Qui-Gon doesn't make it to the end of the movie.
Yeah, that's pretty intense on the track listing to have a title like that. And I will mention, Mike, with this is going to date both of us a little bit, but I had this soundtrack, and guess what format it was in?
We're not
Guess
that
what format
old.
it was in, though?
You had it on audio cassette.
Of course. Just like we did with Dark Empire and the Jedi Academy trilogy and all that stuff. Yeah, I had this on audio cassette.
Not those newfangled compact
No,
discs.
not at all. But yeah, I had this on audio cassette. And Mike, this movie to me stands out a lot.
Although it's funny that I say that, because I do specifically remember the first CD set that I bought was the Return of the Jedi Special Edition that had the stupid, like, new Jabba's Palace music in it.
Jabba rocks. There we go.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the
Phantom
Phantom
Menace blew people out of the park, Mike.
I'm
going to start and say that, like, with the John Williams score right off the bat. Every theme was memorable, but we got to mention the ones that were standout. But the fact that John Williams came out swinging with the new trilogy was unbelievable. And guess what, Mike? This kind of set the pretense and just his path for the next, now we know, 5 movies, right? So this is the beginning of him doing the next 5 movies, episode 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8, and kind of him going on a rampage in a good way.
Oh, okay. So maybe we didn't give John Williams enough credit for
Schindler's
what he
List,
did
right?
in the 90s. Yeah. Well, John Williams also scored Schindler's List.
There it is.
He scored the Olympic Games in 1996. He scored Saving Private Ryan, which is also kind of a big deal. And my personal favorite, in 1993, he did score for Star Wars X-Wing, the computer game.
That doesn't count. That just means he transferred scores over and made a couple extensions. But
hey, man, I'm just reading IMDb.
But you know, Mike,
here.
here's my not hot take at all, but here's my take on this: is none of those were as memorable as episode 1.
That's probably true.
They're
although
fine.
You heard our intro to this segment. I think the most memorable track from the Phantom Menace is Duel of the Fates. I don't think anyone's going to argue with
that might be one of the most memorable tracks in all of Star Wars, if not one of the best tracks in all of Star Wars.
And there's a hilarious YouTube video out there where real words have been associated with the chorus part of this song, and they're singing like hot dog da 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 or whatever. Look it up.
I've also seen a video,
funny.
Mike. I don't know if you've seen this one, but it's a favorite of mine. It's essentially the Duel of Fates lightsaber duel, but every lightsaber clash, the sound has been removed and replaced with an Owen Wilson wow.
Wow, 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 wow. And it speeds up every time, right?
Wow.
That one's also very good.
It's good. As you know, this has been an iconic song that has taken over culture, taken over Star Wars fans. But Mike, this is a song that people that don't know Star Wars, they know this song. That means a lot. That means a lot just for culture. And let's mention more songs in episode 1. So I really like, probably lesser known song, but I really like the Battle Droid Trade Federation song. It's kind of that, it sounds like the First Order song a little bit in the new movies. It's kind of that driving, marchy song, but it's not the Imperial March. And it's just that dum da 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 da. And it's when they're invading the city, when they're invading the Gungan forest, when they're attacking. I like that song. I also really, really love the Darth Maul tribal drum song when they're in the generator hallway, when they're stuck in the hallway, and Qui-Gon is literally just meditating, which I cannot tell you how much I love that. Maul is pacing like a rabid bear, and Qui-Gon is meditating, and Obi-Wan is also pacing, and he's holding his lightsaber like he's ready to go, and Qui-Gon's just meditating, but you have that really, those tribal drums. That's also the song we hear when Maul is hunting Qui-Gon on Tatooine. But we cannot forget, probably the best song, Mike, as you mentioned, one of the best songs after Duel of Fates, Qui-Gon's Noble End. That's a really good song.
It was a spoiler for those who pre-ordered the soundtrack, but it's also very moving and fitting with the cinematic nature of that scene.
It's very dramatic.
Movie.
That's the dun 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 dun. That's when Obi-Wan screams the no, right? That's very iconic now with the movie. It was also in the trailer back in the day before the movie came out, and it's kind of a culmination of the Duel of Fates and the tribal song, and it kind of sets the tone for Obi-Wan and Maul's final fight. But we've also got some standout mentions here. We've got Jar Jar's song and Anakin's song. They're both very playful, interesting songs that are unique of these characters.
Yeah, those are bad. But we could actually talk about the best song in the movie, Augie's Great Municipal Band, which I have always called the Gungan Marching Band anthem that we hear at the end of episode 1.
It's really Gungan Marching Band.
Being a former marching band nerd, I recognized how corny that song was, but also how fun it was, how they're all marching up the main street of Theed to meet with Boss Nass and the real Queen Amidala and everything. And, we have peace. I'm holding this giant glowing ball above my head.
That is the worst song in the movie. Easily.
Screw you. It is so not the worst
song in the whole movie. Without a doubt.
You're the worst.
The best part of that song is Warwick Davis riding a dinosaur. That's
I won't ever argue with anything involving Warwick Davis and dinosaurs.
That song's fine. But, I mean, it closes the movie fine.
No, you're right. It's bad. But it's also memorable because it definitely sticks out in my head. And I'm sure
reminds me of Yub Nub in Return of the Jedi.
It's very similar to Yub Nub.
It's in line with that, but it's not like the rest of the movie. And I got to mention, Mike, right before that song hits, we have a very emotional scene with Qui-Gon's funeral pyre, and we have notes of the Force theme and notes of Obi-Wan's theme and things like that going on. And then it goes straight to that Yub Nub Gungan song. It's like a marching band Yub Nub. It's like, what was destroyed? The Master or the Apprentice? And we have this really somber music, and we have the camera pan to Palpatine's face. Marching band music.
Nothing was destroyed. Everybody skank it to the beat.
Forget everything you know. Just have fun. All right, so let's go to Attack of the Clones now, Mike. So Attack of the Clones, this is not a spoiler for anybody at home, Mike, but this is the movie, the prequels, that has been known to have the least memorable themes. I would say that. Also the least memorable movie. So,
well, no, we can say that Phantom Menace had some good tracks, some good score with it. Attack of the Clones has one good track and the rest are garbage.
I don't think that's true, but I think it has one great.
No, I absolutely do. If you consider relatively the rest of John Williams' work, like, I'm not trying to disrespect.
Oh, you're saying it's like better than still most scores. Like the bad tracks in Phantom Menace are better.
I don't even know about that.
I don't know, man. The Marvel movie scores are pretty weak, except that one theme.
That's a future Patreon bonus episode.
We're gonna knock this out.
Throw punches about that. No, Attack of the Clones does not have a very good score.
But you're talking about one great song.
The one great song is Across the Stars, the love theme for Anakin and Padme.
Good.
And it's fantastic. It's one of the 2 or 3 best out of the entire prequel trilogy. Yeah. It gets stuck in your head and it's great.
No, it's beautiful. It's a perfect song for all of that. And it comes up again later in the future, which is great. I really hope that song comes up in the final season of Clone Wars, Mike, but that's something we'll get to in the future. But Across the Stars. Across the Stars, if you guys are familiar with it, I'm sure you are, but let's just spell it out. It's the song that is it's more of a Lord of the Rings John Williams song, and it has the harp playing the melody. But unlike a Lord of the Rings song, it doesn't have an epic feel. It has a beautiful kind of tranquil fantasy feel, which is really interesting. And it's all throughout the movie. And it does make the love scenes actually better, even though the dialogue is stilted, as we know. And with
stilted, that's
without
a polite word.
The song, can you imagine, Mike, those scenes without the song? Let's think about that.
Now I want to go back and try to watch it without
Let's think
the
about
score
that.
just to see
I've been dying a little bit every day since you came back into my life without the song. That just flat deadpan. That could just be creepy. But with the song, it sounds kind of...
For a second, I thought you were saying that to me, and I was like, that was weird. Oh, wait, no, he's talking about the movie.
But before I die, I want to confess my love to you, before we got into our death. Because, they even played the song as they're going to the gladiatorial ring, right? Which is a fun part of the movie. Let's admit it. But
one of the few.
Great song. There's a couple other interesting songs, Mike. I got a honorable mention I want to throw out, and that of course involves Chris Lee. Why wouldn't it involve Chris Lee? It's the song at the end of the movie when Anakin and Obi-Wan confront Dooku, and Yoda eventually comes later. It's a multi-part song. It starts with the conflict, then it goes into the Dooku Yoda conflict, then it ends with Dooku talking to Palpatine on Coruscant. And it goes through many phases. It's kind of dramatic at the beginning, and then it's kind of in the middle. It's the two masters fighting each other. Then it goes to more that Sith operatic tribal feel at the end when he's talking to Palpatine. And I really like this song a lot. If we're not talking about, the love song.
Yeah, no, that one is perfectly fine. And most of the score for Attack of the Clones is perfectly fine. Except for Zam the Assassin and the chase through Coruscant, because that crap is bad.
It's overdone.
I don't know if somebody told John Williams to incorporate like electric guitar bends into it, or if he decided that on his own. But like starting from when Obi-Wan dives out the Coruscant apartment window to jump onto the assassin droid, when we start hearing the beep,
it's literally an 80s guitar metal bend, whammy bar bend. So if you've seen Dragon Force play, it's their main go-to move. So, it's different, and maybe the different part didn't pay off. That's okay.
Yeah, no, it's bad. It doesn't fit with the rest of Star Wars, and like it doesn't help rescue a scene that is already bad. You know what I'm saying? Like a good score could help like supplement something to the music was good, so it kind of helped rescue the mood of the scene. We just have bad scene and bad music kind of combining for the first time in the prequel trilogy.
Let's move on, though, Mike. We got to talk about the best prequel movie, and the best music in all the prequels probably is...
Okay, both of those are very low bars to hit, but yes, we are going to talk about...
You say they're low
Revenge
bars,
of the
but you
Sith.
agree with both.
Yes, a 60% is a D in a classroom.
Wow. Hey, this movie did not make a 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. We talked about this before. A lot higher.
That's right. It made like a 71 or something like that.
76 or something. It's way higher than you would imagine. So,
no, I like Revenge of the Sith, and I like a lot of the music in Revenge of the Sith.
Really like
in our
this
research for this episode, I was surprised to learn that a music video was created for music.
That is
Revenge
bizarre.
of the
So
Sith.
this was something they did with Revenge of the Sith, which, Mike, I don't think they've ever done with any Star Wars other prequel film. And this was kind of different. So probably the best song in Revenge of the Sith, we can all agree, is called The Battle of the Heroes. It's a song that takes elements from the Duel of Fates, take elements from Obi-Wan's theme and Anakin's theme, combines all three of those things. And we have a song that's heroic and dark and kind of sad. And it's the theme, of course, that Obi-Wan and Anakin fight to. And it's the end of the film. They don't even pull the theme out, Mike, to the very end, which is really interesting. But let's not forget to mention that this film also has other memorable themes. It has pretty much all the final scenes. But it also has, during Order 66, a really memorable, once again, Sith kind of theme we mentioned. It's sad, but Mike, we cannot forget what I would say is one of the best scenes in all of Star Wars, all of films, the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. That scene, guess what? It's a scene with two characters talking, with good dialogue, with nothing crazy going on, and Ian McDiarmid leading the scene, of course. That scene has unbelievably creepy and just like hypnotic monk chanting when they're at the opera house, when Palpatine's telling Anakin about how the Force can save people from dying. And that music is unlike anything we've heard in Star Wars before. It's similar to the Maul and Palpatine stuff we've heard in the earlier prequels. Take it to a whole new level. It's very hypnotic. I don't know if you ever listen to it with like surround sound speakers or headphones. It'll knock you off your seat. I mean, I don't know what else.
Well, I'm not tempted by the dark side of the Force as you are. But I will say, for many of the tracks in Revenge of the Sith, even if you don't remember the specific melody or tune that goes with them, the emotion that goes with them is much stronger. When you're talking about the fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan, or the immolation when Anakin catches on fire, or even the opening scene after you hear the main fanfare and the yellow text go through, when you see Anakin and Obi-Wan in their Jedi Starfighters going down. They're much more memorable, and you remember the feeling and emotion that comes with them much more than the previous two movies.
You're absolutely right. And then we end the movie with the birth of the twins and Padme's death, which are two songs side by side, which we have kind of hope sounding song, and we go into a dark, sad song. And then, of course, the film, Mike, transitions from a really sad song into like a Force theme / New Hope's beginning, which is how the film ends, which is also a really cool way to end the prequels thematically, because at the end, there's actually no dialogue. We see Alderaan, then we see a Tatooine. Of course, we see Luke and Leia where they end up. We see their families where they end up, and we have only music and visuals. And of course, the music is a huge, huge part of this finale.
Yeah, for sure. And like we said at the beginning of this segment, people were worried that John Williams wouldn't be able to recapture the magic or whatever. We were too young to have real opinions about this, but I definitely remember hearing people talk about them. I feel like John Williams, for the most part, did recapture the emotion and feeling of the original trilogy with the score for the prequel trilogy. There are some missteps, like the stupid electric guitar bends in episode 2, but there's also some just bona fide hits, like Duel of the Fates. If you just had to pick one track from the prequel trilogy, it's probably that one.
You're right, Mike.
You could maybe make an argument for Battle of the Heroes. It's one of those two, and Battle of the Heroes kind of draws from Duel of the Fates anyway. So John Williams continued his streak as being the great one, and we will eventually talk about his work in the sequel trilogy. We'll see if we wait till episode 9 comes out or not before we talk about that. And eventually, the Great One is going to be replaced by someone. And that's a totally different conversation.
And down the Mike, line. My semi-hot take I just mentioned earlier, it's not even that hot, but I it's a semi-hot take. I would even say the Duel of Fates might be one of the best top 5 or lower Star Wars tracks of all time. And I don't think that's crazy to say.
I don't. Well, when you phrase it as top 5 or lower, I assume that to mean top 10. And yeah, in terms of top 10 Star Wars themes, when you consider like the main theme, the Imperial March, the Force theme, Han and Leia, Yoda. Yeah, no, I can definitely see.
No, there you go. There you go, right there.
10,
the main theme, the Force theme, Imperial March, Duel of Fates. That's just shooting it out. I think it's in the top 5 easily, but definitely top 10.
There's absolutely a good argument for that. I might put something like Rey's theme
we'll
above
get to that though.
But that's a conversation for later. But yeah, no,
without a doubt, it's in
agree.
the top
Deserves a spot
10,
in the top
probably
5
in the
or
top
10.
5, and that's crazy. And like we said, what's so cool about the Duel of Fates, and probably even the episode 2 song, which is the Across the Stars, and then of course the hero song, the Battle of the Heroes in episode 3. Mike, I think all 3 of those are actually culturally as memorable as the main themes in each individual movie and the other movies.
I'm going to disagree with you there because culturally, the one theme associated with Star Wars is the opening credit.
Oh, no. I agree with that. I'm saying each movie has a cultural movie.
Oh, okay.
Theme.
If you were picking the one theme for each movie beyond that, okay.
And I would go as far as saying that people can sing those more readily right now than the Last Jedi theme or something in The Force Awakens. And I think that's simply more just because of time that's passed.
Okay, no, I agree with you. I thought you were saying these things were more iconic than da da da.
No, of course not.
Da 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 da.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. No, I'm definitely with you there. So that is our first round of talking about the scores from the prequel trilogy. I'm sure we'll revisit it at some point. Eventually, we're going to talk about the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy and the standalone movies. But that was our first foray into the world of Star Wars scores.
Once again, we have some reviews to read from you guys at home. And that's anyone that leaves us a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. We really appreciate it. 5-star reviews are awesome. And if you could leave a 5-star review with written words, it's even better. So we're going to start one today by someone called Audacity City. The title is Good Show. These guys know Luke Skywalker and they know Star Wars. Period. That's it, Mike.
Boom. Convinced him. Fooled him. Whatever you want to call it. We have somebody on our side.
Thank you for writing that review, Audacity, and I thank you for those kind words.
Yeah, and our next one today is, we're keeping it simple today. Coffee and Skywalker from Sharon Skywalker. And if you're the Sharon I'm thinking of, and if you listen to this, you're the best. And if it's not the Sharon I'm thinking of, you're probably also the best for writing these words. I like the show with a cup of coffee on my morning commute. You know what? I can barely stand the show while we do it. So if you can enjoy this show with a cup of coffee on your morning commute, more power to you, Sharon. Thank you so much for listening and giving us a great review.
Once again, if you guys want to have your review read on the show, just write us a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. It helps us out more than you know. Keep leaving reviews. Just scroll down. Like you go to our page on Apple Podcasts and just scroll down a little bit. People ask me all the time, where's the review part? You got to actually scroll past our episode, scroll down to the bottom, and it says write a review. Just click on that. It's write us a review. Thank you, and we will read it in the future. Keep in mind, if you leave us a review now, we're slowly going through all the reviews. We'll get to it. But you know what, guys?
If we have missed you, we're sorry.
You know what, guys? Like, if you keep giving us reviews, we'll never stop reading them, which I think is the greatest thing ever. So keep leaving us reviews. We'll keep reading them.
And that'll do it for us here in the Canon Cantina today. Check out all of our new art, like we mentioned at the top of the show, at thecanoncantina.com. You'll have links to all of our social media, and you can listen to the show there as well. The show is also available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Podbean, Podcast Addict, YouTube, and we're also on Spotify. Jesse live streams stuff on Twitch. There's a lot of new exciting content coming to Twitch and YouTube in the
please
near
follow
future.
Twitch.
Give it a little
follow
bit
our
of
Twitch
a
and you'll
tease.
get that stuff. That's a good tease. Keep help spreading the word of our show, guys, by subscribing, rating, and reviewing. If you think we can do something better, just send us an email at canoncantina@gmail.com. Please join us next week as we wrap up this Jedi Academy trilogy with the final book of this trilogy called Champions of the Force. Check it out on Audible or just read it and follow along with us. we want you there. We want you to hear the end of the story. Luke Skywalker is frozen in his own body. This is serious.
It is so funny to me because I read this book a long time ago. I don't remember the details of it, and I am legitimately excited to listen to the next book on Audible and then talk about it with you next week, because I don't remember how Luke gets out of this situation, or
what students survive, or what happens.
The Empire is defeated or whatever. Yeah. So thanks for joining us here in the Canon Cantina today, everybody. Cheers.
May the Force be with you.
Boring conversation anyway.